or survivors, because they really are survivors.
You just hit on something a second ago, and you said that all the women of the Senate came together and signed on. Are you finding in that as you move forward that you have a lot of colleagues on both sides that see that working together can make a difference? And because when you look at DC, a lot of people feel like right now there isn't, but it seems like whenever we're talking about success, it's when you all come together.
Absolutely. You know, to get something done, it takes both sides of the aisle, and it takes compromise. And one of the things that has been fun for me, and I think for other women senators, is that the women in the Senate get together about every other month. We have dinner together. Republicans and Democrats, we get to know each other, and it's not, we work together very closely. And certainly Senator Ayotte and I work very closely on issues that affect New Hampshire, because as we know, we're a small state. We've got to work together in order to address the challenges we face.
That's right. You also sit on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and we've all been reading about what's been going on in Ukraine. How do you support Ukraine? How do you support the government and the people of that nation so that they can be stronger and deal with the issues that they're facing with Russia?
Well, I think most of us have watched what's happening in Ukraine. There are people who wanted freedom in that country, who wanted to look west, who have thrown out a dictator who was their president, and are really trying to build a country now. And it's been a huge concern and really outrageous to me, especially in international law, to see Russia move into the Crimea and essentially annex that part of the Ukraine. And there have been sanctions that are put on Russia, and we have been working on a bill in the Senate to try and help Ukraine, because one of their biggest challenges is economic stability. And so we have legislation that would provide about $1 billion in aid to Ukraine. It would reform some of the programs in the International Monetary Fund to try and make sure that they can provide help to Ukraine, and making sure that their economy doesn't fail. I think it's very important in this interim period when this transitional government is getting on its feet in Ukraine. They have some technocrats who have experience. I had the opportunity with the Senate Foreign Relations Committee to meet with the new transitional president there in Ukraine, who was very impressive and talked about the challenges that the country is facing, talked about the sacrifices that people are going to have to make and that they're willing to make in order to get the country on a stronger economic footing. So I think we need to look at all the ways in which we can help support the new government there.
Another way you've been working across the aisle is that you've been working with Senator Farmer and on energy efficiency legislation. And it's one of the biggest, probably most important work that's gone on since 2007, 2008, and to truly change some issues that have been facing us. Can you just talk about that?
Well, I can. Energy efficiency is the cheapest, fastest way to deal with our energy needs. And we understand the challenges of the high cost of energy here in New England, where we're at the end of the pipeline. And our oil costs to heat our homes is very high. We're getting access to natural gas is challenging. And so we need to look at other ways in which we can provide energy for people. And efficiency is one of those. Rob Portman, who went to Dartmouth, so he has a New Hampshire connection, even though he represents Ohio in the Senate, has been a great partner in this. And our legislation, according to the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, if we pass the legislation this year, by 2030, it would help create 190,000 jobs. It would save consumers about $17 billion a year, and it would be the equivalent of taking 22 million cars off the road. So it's a win-win-win, in terms of creating jobs, in terms of saving costs to consumers, and in terms of the environment. And this is legislation that has no mandate, it has no new spending in it, and it's legislation that we can pass through the Congress. We have a similar bill that's sponsored by Peter Welch, our neighbor in Vermont. And so we think we've got some real momentum to get this not just in
month, we have to start dealing with the fact that there's an election coming up this year.
We're already dealing with it.
And you're right, we're already dealing
We
with it.
saw them out front.
The Affordable Health Care Act is going to be a significant issue in the fall election. Although it's not perfect, how do you feel about the decisions that have been made on the Affordable Health Care Act?
Well, as you point out, it's not perfect, and we have to fix what's not working, and I've been trying to do that, looking at ways in which we can try and change the law to make sure that it is working for people. But I believe that people in New Hampshire and people across this country should have access to affordable quality health care. I don't think anybody wants to go back to a system where if you had a previous illness, you could be denied health insurance, where if you got sick, got cancer, got some other major illness, you could use up your health benefits and no longer be able to get treatment under your health insurance. Where if you're a woman, you were discriminated against just because you were a woman, where you, in many cases, didn't get the preventive health that is important for people. And unfortunately, the critics of the law want to repeal it, but they don't have a plan for what to replace it with. And what we need to do is to work on it, to fix it, and move forward. But to repeal it with nothing to replace it with doesn't make sense.
I think I've had that a second ago, it's an election year, and already we see an incredible amount of ads coming in, especially attacking yourself. We've seen some for Representative Carol Porter and Representative Andy Tucker, but a lot of money is being brought in from wherever it is to portray you in a negative light. Are you concerned, one, about how that affects the politics of New Hampshire and how we go about electing our officials? And then two is on the question of whether former Senator Scott Brown came into the race and why he wouldn't take and file until pledge that it was his idea. So two questions.
Well, I think there's reason for everybody to be concerned about the millions of dollars that are being spent, not just in New Hampshire, but across the country, hundreds of millions of dollars, actually, by third-party groups who don't have to identify themselves, so voters don't know who they are, who they represent, what their motives are, and we're seeing that happen in New Hampshire as well. So when Scott Brown said that he was interested in getting into the race, I issued to him the same People's Pledge that he had come up with in Massachusetts when he was running for the Senate, and Elizabeth Warren was running against him. And according to the pledge, he would agree that any third-party ads that are coming in, if there's an ad that comes in on my behalf, I would have to pay half the cost of that ad to a charity of my opponent's choice,
Right.
and vice versa. And what we saw in Massachusetts is that essentially shut down that third-party money that was coming in. And it also reduced the number of negative ads that candidates did by about 50%. That's pretty significant. I think most voters would like to see fewer negative ads. And it also meant that the candidates were accountable for what was on the air, because they paid for it, so they had to take responsibility for it. And I think all of those things would be good for this election. And I was disappointed to hear Scott Brown say that he wasn't going to accept that People's Pledge that he had come up with in the 2012 election. And he said, at that time, that was going to be good for the voters in Massachusetts. Well, it's going to be good for the voters in Massachusetts. I don't know why he thinks it's not going to be good for the voters in New Hampshire. That's disappointing. I think the voters in New Hampshire should decide this election without interference from third-party groups.
Senator, I think we're about out of time, so I just want to say that I really appreciate you coming. I appreciate you and the team. I think the team has benefited from the programs that you've brought here, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you, Mayor. I look forward to working with you as well, and of course, Chris, to have the mayor and the chair of the school